2022 marks the 150th year since the founding of our community, Fowler, California. My name is Eric Haddon, and I'll be your host through this series of Sesquicentennial episodes celebrating 150 years of tradition, community, and progress. Over the past several weeks, I've had the opportunity to sit and chat with members of our community, listen to their stories, and come to a greater understanding of what Fowler means to them and what makes this community so very special. We talk about their family's past, the present, and the future of the town that we call home. And it's a tremendous privilege to be able to share these stories with all of you. On a warm October evening, I met with David Blayney, a gentleman whose familial roots in Fowler date back to the 1880s. We met inside of one of Fowler's most prominent buildings, a place that I passed by an innumerable number of times but never had the opportunity to step inside, the Presbyterian Church. David was kind enough to spend some time with me discussing his family's history, his hopes for the future, and what Fowler means to him.
Yeah, my name is David Harris Blayney, and I'm fortunate that I have two connections to Fowler, early connections, my mother and my father both. We'll start with my mother. She's related to Amos and Antoinette Harris. Amos and Antoinette came to Fowler in 1881, a year before Fowler was actually incorporated as a town. Mm-hmm. And they came to the area just east of Temperance, south of South Avenue. And he had 320 acres there and established a farm. And Antoinette, when she got here, she was expecting vineyards and orchards, and she said in the obituary, it said, she looked out at a turkey ranch and a sheep shearing yard and was a little downhearted, but she vowed that she would make the desert bloom, and she did. And she was one of the charter members, Antoinette Harris was one of the charter members of the Fowler Improvement Association. And I believe that that's one of the oldest women's organizations, service organizations in California. So we're proud of that. Amos and Antoinette went on to have two sons, my great-grandfather Frank, and their daughter Belle is my grandmother, is my mom's mom. She married Floyd Pendergrass, and he passed away when my mom was just 3 years old. And Belle passed away when my mom was about 19. So she had a hard life in her young life, but she married Loris Blayney, my father, and they together they farmed and raised a family in Fowler and became very connected to the Fowler community. Mm-hmm. I'll start with my father's side. My great-grandfather, Oberlin Charles, and my grandfather, Arthur Charles, and Oberlin's wife, Alice Stone Blayney, came out from Lawrence, Kansas in 1875 to Visalia, California. And they farmed around. They farmed in Visalia. They farmed over in the San Luis Obispo County, up in the Napa County for a while, and then eventually in 1882, the year Fowler was incorporated, they moved back to Fresno County, just north of Fowler, and had the family farm. My grandfather Arthur married Mary Gower, and he moved out to the ranch the house that I live on, and he had a ranch of 320 acres there, and they raised three kids. Lillian, Charles, and Edwin. And Edwin is my Uncle Ed, who the senior center is named for. Oh. Yes, and that's interesting. You know, when they were raising the funds for it, they did a lot of paper drives. And I would drive the truck over to Easton to recycle the paper with Uncle Ed. And he told me one day, he said, you know, they're going to name the new center after me. And he said, you know, that's quite an honor, but he said there's five other men they could name it after. You know, Yosh Honda, Haskell and Cam Oliver, and a couple other names he mentioned, but he was very, it was a privilege, he said, to have the center named after him. And he was a real jovial guy. He was always happy. And that was Uncle Ed. Anyway, his mom, Mary Gower, passed away when he was about 4. And so my grandfather Arthur remarried Laura Fry, and she was 20 years younger than him at the time. And he had 3 more kids, James Blayney, Alice Blayney, and my father, Loris Blayney. He had my dad was born when my grandfather Arthur was 56. So there's an extended family. We have a lot of uncles and cousins. And anyway, Arthur, like I said, he moved from the family farm north of Fowler to south of Fowler, and they farmed there till his death. And my dad started farming the acreage, and I came in with my dad and started farming the acreage, and we kept it going until 2019, and then we retired from farming. My father passed away in February of this last year of 2022, and my mom is still living at the home. She's going to be 96 here next month.
Oh, that's great.
And the next 2 months, and she's not in very good health, but the family wishes were that they could stay in the home, so she's in the home. And so we've had a long history of farming in the family. And I mentioned my Auntie Alice. She was a counselor and a teacher at Fowler High School, and she never married, but she always said she had 1,000 kids. And she was much loved by her students, and it was evident at her funeral. There was one gal that she counseled. Her name was Carol Jean Jackson. And every year on my aunt's birthday, Carol Jean would send her a dozen roses until her death. And I had never met Carol Jean until the funeral. And we held each other, and she said, "You're Davy?" I says, "Yeah." "You're Carol Jean?" She says, "Yeah." And we just cried. We hugged and cried, and it was a sweet moment. Anyway, I mentioned Oberlin and Arthur coming out to this area. As far as this Presbyterian church goes, in 1886, after a year of Sunday school, 13 folks decided that they wanted to establish a church. And so Oberlin and his wife Alice, and Oberlin's brother William Ferris Blayney, and his son Arthur, and his daughter Pearl Catherine Blayney, they all went. They were the charter members, or they were the 5 of the 13 of the charter members, and so that was pretty cool that they wanted to establish their own church. And the problems they had in those days were the churches would outgrow their churches, and there were 2 Presbyterian churches in Fowler, and this one was known as the Trinity, or the First Presbyterian, and then there was the Bethel or Bethel Church, known as also the United Presbyterian Church. Now, the original Presbyterian Church was a little wooden structure. They added onto it, and then in 1921, part of it burned down, and so they relocated to this space right here and built this church over in 1923, and it was dedicated in 1948 after it was fully paid for. It said in the records. I thought that was cute. Anyway, so and the 2 churches merged in 1961. The UP church came, and we merged the memberships, and they all came to this church, and it's been here since then. So, like I said, we have a long history here in Fowler, and I'm very proud to be part of this project. Yeah. On a side note, William Ferris Blayney, my great-grandfather's brother, he used to run sheep up in what now is the Florence Lake area, on the South Fork of the San Joaquin River. And the Blayney Meadows is an area up there that's named for him. And they would take their sheep up there in the summer because, as we all know, it gets hot here in the summer. And it always has. So anyway, well, that's pretty much the history of my family.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that background, and thank you for your willingness to participate in our project. You obviously have a tremendous family legacy here in Fowler, and you've had the opportunity to grow up here. What has that experience been like, to watch this town grow and transition over the last several decades?
It's been real interesting. I don't think we're losing that small town feel, and people will still, if you stop them and ask for directions, they'll give you directions. that small town charm is still here. We're losing it though, because we're growing. Right. Things are changing. The Leave It to Beaver days that I grew up in are no more. But that doesn't, not to say that we can't promote or strive to be neighborly and to know our residents and to be one town of Fowler.
One of the things that I've heard from so many people that I've talked to, they continually reference the sense of community, the feeling of community that exists here in Fowler. Do you feel that's true? Is it one of the things that makes Fowler so special? Oh, yeah.
When I was a kid coming into school, I lived out in the country, so rode the bus. And I would hang out with my friends sometimes on the weekends and or after school. And there were four moms that had permission to spank me if I got out of hand. Not just my mom, but 4 other moms that had an eye on me. And I knew that. So you watched your P's and Q's. But on the same sense, it was like an extended family. And it wasn't like a punishment. It was like we're being loved. You don't realize it at the time, but you look back on it and you say, wow, they cared about me. Cared enough to take an interest.
You're right. That is very unique and very special. We touched a little bit on the growth, but when you think about Fowler and where it's headed over the next 150 years, where do you think it's going?
Wow. I'd like to be able to live and see that. I think we're all going to be connected along the Valley Corridor in some way, whether it's business or homes. I would hope that we could slow the growth down a little bit and not out-resource our water and our other facilities that are important to live, and especially water. If we don't get some snow significantly in next few years, then it's really going to impact California.
Yeah.
Because the population is growing,
right,
and there's no slowing it down. Especially with the political atmosphere, we're not as conservative. This area is very conservative, but most of California is not, and that's just the way it is. So we're not going to change that, but we need to learn how to compromise and get along with each other, politically and socially, culturally. So that's the thing I've seen, is that we seem to embrace culture now more than we ever did. And I think it's too bad we don't celebrate the uniqueness of being American. And of course, culture is all part of that, but it just seems to me now that we've forgotten our values. We've gotten away from God. And but I know it's coming back. You can see it. After this COVID thing, people are hungry for fellowship. People are hungry for connection. That's a great word, connection. Yeah, and so I'm optimistic that it's going to happen.
I want to transition a little bit. You were kind enough to invite me to interview you inside this beautiful building, the Presbyterian Church. And I'm sure this place has been the location of countless memories for you over the years, but what does this building mean to you?
My father did a lot of fixer-upper work here and little things, and I accompanied him many times. This is like a second home, this building and the people. I had a teacher, a 6th grade teacher, Ruth L. Fever, and she wasn't married, and she was tough. Later I realized she got me through college because she taught us how to outline as 6th graders. I was scared to death of her while I was going to school. She was a member here, I'd see her and oh, there's my teacher. And anyway, but I'd see her afterwards, and after I was out of a little more in high school, I think, and I'd see her down those stairs, I can remember, and she'd say, "How's my Davy?" And I'd say, "Oh, Miss Fever, thank you. How are you?" And you could just feel the love. And when you're here on Sunday, it's like a family. They put in this coffee house, and oh my goodness, you can't hardly get people out of here. But that's okay too. They're not supposed to leave. But no, this building and the people and the pastors have meant a great deal to me. And you have to know a little backstory about myself. I'm a cross actually between Jonah and the prodigal son, in the fact that I left the church back in my 20s. I'm 68 now. But I left the church back in my 20s, and I left for 20 years. And I didn't, I just thought it was my time. And I was challenged to come back to church in Kingsburg. And when I was helping out at a Mennonite church there, Vacation Bible School. It was in the park, so it was okay. I wasn't in a building. And a young man named Rick Marcus, he challenged me. He said, Dave, you're not doing right. You know, Peggy, your wife's bringing the kids to church. You're staying home. You need to be the man. You need to man up. And he was a slight of a guy. I could have throttled him, you know. but he spoke the truth. And sure enough, it was right after 9/11, we came back to this church. And I expected everybody to say, oh, where you been? Look who's back. Oh, no, after 20 years, what I got was, we've been praying for you. Welcome home. Oh, man, I'm going to lose it. But it was, so like I said, this church really holds a deep meaning and love for me, and not just with God, but with the people and with the history and the connection to Fowler.
Now, that is a great story. I feel like it might be the capstone to our conversation, but let me ask you, is there anything else you want to share?
I didn't mention that on the Blayney line, I have a brother, and I have a cousin, Doug, the only two male Blayneys, and they both had 3 girls. I had a boy and a girl, and John carried on the family name. And before my father passed, John married Janelle Fry, and they were going to have a son. And his name is Levi Allen Blayney. And I remember telling my dad, and at the dinner table, he was eating his dinner, I said, Dad, you and I can die happy now, because we got an heir to the family. John's going to have a boy. And he just turned and looked at me and smiled and didn't say a word and went back to eating. I knew it connected with him. You know, it's like, family line. So, but that's about the only other thing I was going to say.
Well, thank you again for your willingness to sit and talk with me. I've enjoyed your stories and our time together, so thank you so much.
But thank you.
Thank you again to David Blayney for his willingness to participate in this project and for showing me one of the most beautiful buildings in Fowler. Something that can't quite be captured through audio is the way that the light illuminates the stained glass window at the far end of the church. It casts this beautiful iridescent glow throughout the pews that is really just indescribable. A special thanks to the members of the Fowler Sesquicentennial Committee who have put so much of their time and energy into commemorating the history of our community. The conversations you'll hear as a part of this series will be one of the items archived in the Sesquicentennial time capsule that's scheduled to be buried on December 28, 2022. If you have an item you'd like to contribute to the time capsule, send an email to hello@voicesoffowler.com, and I'll give you the details on how you can contribute your item to the capsule.